Hi,
Hello.
nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. I'm
Thank
glad
you.
we're all here.
Absolutely.
So I'm the speaker, but the other picture of Logan, this is the brains of the outfit right down there. So she's co-hosting and she's going to help with setting up any kind of screen sharing or anything you want to do. So I'll let you two
Okay,
work it out.
thank you. And you are Laurel, right?
I'm Laurel, yes. And
Okay,
how do
sorry.
I pronounce your name? Omri?
Omri, yeah,
And your
perfect.
last name?
It's too long.
No, it's
Senderovich.
not.
Senderovich.
Senderovich.
Absolutely.
Okay. And do you want to be called Omri or do you want to be called Professor Senderovich?
Omri, please.
Omri, please. Oh, got it. Okay.
Just a minute. I'll put my other computer to sleep. Okay. Hmm. Hi, Logan, your name is? Yeah,
Yeah, can
Logan.
you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Um,
My headphones are dead, so I probably sound very quiet right now, but
Yeah.
hello, nice to meet
okay. Nice to meet you too. I have I have a PowerPoint to share in a share screen. Let me open it. Second. Okay. How do I do share screen? I'm sorry, I don't teach in Zoom and I'm quite clueless
you.
in
Laurel, can you make me the host of this by any chance?
Pardon me? Can't hear you
Can you
very
make
well.
me?
Host tools? Are you a co-host? Okay. Share screen. Um, share? No? Repeat. I couldn't hear you very well, Logan. What did you want me to do? She's working on it.
all right. Oh, here she said something in the chat.
Yeah.
Yes, but can you make me the host?
Can you make me the host?
Hmm.
Okay. Tell me how to do that. I've I've got host tools, more, pause, breakout rooms, polls, quizzes, no. Host tools, share, no,
Click on
no.
participants, she says.
Click on participants. Okay, thank
And
you.
then next to her name, there's a
The
drop
drop
down.
down. Okay, okay. Let me get down to that. I'm looking at messages and I'm not looking at participants. I've got mute for you. I've got some dots. Make host. Yes, it's all yours.
Oh, all right. Now, how do I share? Ah, okay. Desktop. So do you see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, so if I do this, you see it, right? Okay, great. So, but we'll start without the share screen, right?
That's fine.
Okay. we'll start like this, and then when I start, I'll do the share screen.
Okay. And I will tell everybody, hello, how are you? And since this is billed as a dessert and a movie,
Uh-huh.
I'm supposed to ask people what their dessert is
Okay.
and show mine, although I
Okay.
don't think I'll eat it. So we'll have to talk about dessert for a while. So,
I
how
have
long
a
have you?
I have a recess bar here in my office.
Perfect.
I'll
Perfect. I hope Logan has something, maybe a Tootsie Roll Pop or something. So how did you like the movie, Omri?
I actually loved it.
I did
Um,
too.
yeah, I thought it was very beautiful.
Yes.
Um, uh, it was extremely sad to me as well.
Yes.
And one of the things is that I can't imagine today, after October 7th, I can't imagine something like that is unimaginable today.
At now.
Even now, even that project with all its problematics and so on, even that is you can't. No one will on both sides will send their kids to do that kind of project today. No way.
No.
And that was to me that was what was so tragic to see that movie today.
Hmm.
And I have some other thoughts, but it's just it was very beautiful. I mean,
It really was. And when I wrote you originally, I was a teacher, and
mhm,
I could understand even boys and girls who live in the same town and have no religious or ethnic background
yeah,
differences are very few. They don't want to touch each other.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And they don't want to do that. I mean, I understood the children, but the culture was so hard for me to understand.
Yeah,
So, well, we're still waiting for a few minutes, so
yeah,
we're all
yeah.
set to go though, right?
Yeah, in that sense, it's very there's something kind of misleading. Exactly on the thing that you're pointing out. There's something misleading because you get the impression that from the movie or the effect that they don't want to touch each other and so on because they're Arabs or
Oh,
Jews.
no.
It's exactly what you say. It's
Yeah,
simply kids who don't want to touch each other, and
right.
that's also what's very cute about the movie. You can't help like smiling when you see it. But
Hmm. I loved the end when the a little boy, I think his name was Allah,
uh-huh.
and his dancing partner, he was taking her out on his boat.
Oh yeah, that
That
was amazing.
was just so sweet.
It was. It,
And I wonder, I think that the movie was 2017, possibly.
yeah, I don't remember something like that. Yeah,
So, I mean, they're all, big teenagers now, but
yeah.
I just, well, you've got a big job to explain to all of us the history of the conflict. And
Mm.
I felt somewhat like I misspoke when I wrote to you and said, you're assistant professor of Jewish studies in what department? The department is Jewish studies, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
See, I guess I thought maybe you were in the school of religion, or
Mm.
is it part of
No,
the school of religion, or no?
no,
No,
it's an independent department.
independent school.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I was at KU a long time ago,
Oh yeah.
way long time ago.
What did you study? Education?
I studied education. Yes. At
Uh,
first, I studied theater.
mm.
Um, and those students had wonderful parties. They dress up,
Uh-huh.
they go for it big time. And one or two get drunk, and then
Uh-huh.
they say, "Why am I in Kansas? I should be in New York, or I should be in San Francisco or LA." So
Uh-huh.
one of them that I went to school with did go to LA, and that he became famous. He was Don Johnson. And then
Who's
another
he?
who was
Sorry, I'm not.
he's an old man now, but he was quite hot in the
Mm,
in the 80s. He was a detective in a television show.
okay.
And then the other one went to New York and he became famous, Mandy Patinkin.
Okay, I don't
And
know him either.
he he has he was in He's amazing. I recently saw him at the Lead Center.
Mm.
And I thought, I think I'll go to that show because I hadn't seen him for 50 years. Boy, he's old. But, so some people, besides feeling strange that they didn't go, a few went and they did literally find fame and fortune. But I decided I think I want to be a school teacher.
Uh-huh.
It seemed to jive with my skill set a little bit better. So, but yeah, there are a lot of schools that didn't exist when I was there, but
Mm.
that's okay. The world was quite different when I was there.
You
So,
taught here at Lawrence?
hmm
Hmm.
I was at KU you weren't born yet. It was 1968 to
Hmm.
1972. So back in the day, it
Hmm.
was very exciting. A lot of campus unrest. We're going to wait, aren't we, Logan, till the time we've got somebody in the waiting room, but we'll let him stamp around and get a little anxious. All right. And I don't know what kind of group we're going to get, but I thought the film was really sweet. And I watched it twice. I wrote down a lot of the things that he said.
Mm.
Um, and everyone was so gentle with each other when he first spoke to the teachers and said, "We're going to dance." And the teacher in the hijab said, "Oh, we don't dance in Islam."
Mm.
Right off the bat, it was
Yeah.
just that even was more. And he had great respect, but he insisted. So
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of interesting that they let him do that. And I thought the one principal in the school that had both Palestinian and Israeli children in it, uh,
Hmm.
she had them.
Mm.
She had she they listened to her. She was very strong. So Senderowitz.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my cousin is Jenny Pankowitz, and my other cousin is Ellie Reisowitz.
Okay.
So but you didn't say it Witz exactly, but
Yeah.
we're good. Okay. Counting down the seconds. It's like waiting for the ball to drop on New Year's Eve.
I'll close the door for a minute.
Sure. Logan, are you going to stay on till the bitter end because you're running the show? Okay. And it's going to automatically record. Okay. Great. Oh, there's two in the waiting room now. Would either of you like a piece of this?
What is it actually?
It is a pumpkin whoopie pie.
Oh, sounds good.
It's kind of like two cakes. I've made whoopie pies for my daughter, but not pumpkin ones. They're like two soft cakes with a cream filling in between them, and they're really more than one person should eat. Look, it's
Yeah.
almost as big as my head.
Yeah, they're
It's
huge.
very big. Too big, actually. So, but I wanted to wave it around to remind people to bring a dessert. I wasn't home all day long. A pressure, tire pressure gauge signal went off in my car, and I went over to the tire
Mm.
store, and I was there for 3.5 hours. And
Wow.
I didn't get out until I bought four new tires. So
Wow.
I'm exhausted and poor now.
And poor. Yeah.
So I didn't have time to make a dessert. So I bought one on the way home.
I left my two kids with the little one crying at home because my wife is in a conference,
Oh,
and so I invited a babysitter, but
oh,
it's only like our
first,
second time with the kids, so he was he was crying.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
Is that okay?
Well,
Nah,
we'll get this thing knocked off in an hour. I'm going to start letting people in.
sure.
7 o'clock. Okay. Here comes
Th-
Ellen.
This used to be live before, like in person.
I don't think so.
Mm.
I think this particular thing got started during the COVID time.
Hmm.
Okay. Here's somebody. I think maybe Logan's letting people in, which is great. Hello.
I'll
Does
wait here.
everybody have dessert? No?
Nope.
Hmm. I'll get mine.
Okay, Logan says this has always been virtual. It's
Mm.
never
Yeah,
been in
it's
person. Well, we're welcome. We're going to wait for a few more people to join us, but we
yeah.
have figured out how to share the screen, so we can't wait to get started. Okay, here comes somebody else. Is it raining yet? I hope so.
I didn't.
I
I
didn't
didn't.
see any.
No.
So dry.
Doesn't look like it.
No.
It's
Did
supposed
you
to
all
rain
see the
today.
did you see the moon last night?
Yes.
Unbelievable.
The harvest moon.
I know, so beautiful. It's just so huge. And I was thinking a friend of mine in Michigan saw it at the same time. I mean,
Oh,
by that I mean uh, there's so much more to think about when you look up. Just how we're all in it together, and at the same time. Very beautiful. Well, we'll give everybody a few more minutes, I guess. Just a couple. And did everybody see the movie?
oh yeah.
Yeah.
I'm the
Any?
one that recommended it.
Oh, good. Good. Were you a teacher?
No.
No. A dance instructor?
No.
No.
It just looked like it was really interesting. And then once I started watching it, it was like, oh my gosh,
I know.
so unusual.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you know I did not get the link? No.
You
And so,
didn't?
no, so I emailed you and then I emailed Kathleen and somehow she got a hold of Logan and I think Logan sent it to me.
Well, I don't know why you didn't get it. I think I sent it to everybody on the list. But what's your last? I'll check. What's your last name?
Metzger, Metzger.
I live out near Lone Star. There's a lot of Metzgers out there.
Yeah,
Are you
yeah.
one of them?
No. Well,
Okay.
probably way back somewhere, yes.
Okay.
It's German, quite a popular German name.
Okay. Well, I don't know. It's about 7:04. We'll give it one more minute and then we'll get the party started, I think.
Yeah, we usually have more than this.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, here's Shelley. I didn't
Hi,
see her come. Hi.
I saw Corolla earlier and I think she was going to join. She may not have gotten home yet.
Okay. Well, anybody can come anytime they want, so we'll get started.
Hmm.
I'm glad we all made it. I had quite the technical debacle last night. I had gray anatomy, but somehow or other I had two different links that I sent. Some people got one link and some people got the other one.
Oh,
Logan was a rock star. She figured it all out, but I don't know how I did that either, but I'm learning. But and I felt very bad about it, thought about being unhappy with myself, and then I remembered the people in Lawrence, Kansas, who were going to put on a drone show for the 4th of July.
Oh,
And I realized, well, it wasn't that huge a disappointment. I mean, we Logan pulled it out at the last minute, and it wasn't quite a spectacular fail, an epic fail like that, but it was I felt pretty bad about it.
Yeah, that's all right.
Oh, somebody says the message may have confused some as it said 4 through 5. Well, I should mail one thing at a time. And heading was 7 as the original. All turned out okay. Yep, it all turned out okay. I've heard both God and the devil are in the details, so I don't know which one that was, but we'll go from there. Why don't we get started? Because I know Omri has an amazing, he's got a lot to tell us. But I just want to welcome everybody. We already talked a little bit about desserts. I was at a car tire shop all day long, so I didn't have time to make anything, but I went to the Merc. This is a plug for the Merc. I went to the Merc and I bought this thing, which is called a pumpkin whoopie pie. Have you ever had a whoopie pie? They're kind of like two cookies with cream filling. So anyway, if you were here, I'd give you all a piece of it, but it's here and we'll think about it. And um, so has anybody else got a dessert? You've got something in your hand or you've had your dessert anyway. Good. All right. Yes, and Omri has a Reese's bar, so we're ready to go. Um, it's really a pleasure to have Andre here tonight. He prefers to be called Omri. He says his name is a little too long
Mm.
to pronounce. He is an assistant professor in the School of Jewish Studies, and he has a lot to tell us. And we were chatting some about the film at the beginning, and I think he has a lot more information to share than we would have ever guessed, especially as situations are now in that part of the world, how that might even be different than what we saw. Um, and we always want to thank our people that make these kinds of things possible. And of course, that's the Capital Federal. And Kathleen said, when you go to the bank, if you bank there, make sure to tell somebody that you appreciate how they fund the retroactive program so that we can get together and talk about things and talk about movies and have all the other events we do. And also the David and Sharon Katzman Foundation. They've been really helpful in getting us off the ground and keeping us afloat. So we're grateful to them. And Omri, I think you need to take over now. And I had just a couple of questions. I think, first of all, if you just tell us a little bit about yourself and where you're from originally and how long you've been here and your background and how long you've been here at KU, and we'll take it from there.
Great. Thank you very much, Laurel, and thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. Yeah, so my name is Omri. I was born and raised in Israel, in a kibbutz in Israel. And do you hear me well?
Hmm.
Okay.
Maybe a little
Okay.
A little
louder.
louder.
All right. So I was born and raised in Israel. I did my BA and MA in history at the Tel Aviv University. And when I went to do get my PhD, I applied to universities in the US, and I ended up getting a PhD in history and anthropology from the University of Michigan. And I came to KU last year, so this is my second year, and I'm here as a visiting assistant professor of Jewish studies or of Israel studies. Um, yeah, that's what I do here now. I teach courses on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the history of Israel. And next semester, I also teach a course in anthropology, so unrelated to Israel, but um, that's what I'm doing here. Yeah, I think that's what I have to say
Also,
about myself.
also your background mentioned the Israeli Institute, and I've heard of it before. What is that exactly?
Yeah.
And how are you affiliated with it?
So the Israel Institute is an institute that promotes teaching about Israel on American campuses. And what they do is they fund half of the position. So half of my position is
Oh,
funded by the Israel Institute, the other half by KU, for these couple of years, and they are, as far as I know, they're as far as I can understand, they're kind of a nonpartisan institute. I wasn't able to recognize, I don't know, any specific political agenda or whatever. Nobody ever
mhm,
told me do this or say this or don't do that. I
okay.
think besides the general fact that they think that Israel is a legitimate state, I didn't see any kind of political agenda, but
Hmm.
yet, at least.
Okay. Well, I say I've heard of it before, but I wasn't exactly sure what it was, and it makes great sense. So, I was wondering, what were you familiar with this film? Had you heard of it before?
No, never. I never
Okay.
heard of it and I never saw it. I just saw it first time a week ago or 2 weeks ago, something
Right.
like that.
And I was wondering, did you feel it was accurate, or did you think it, I mean, we were talking about it before, and I'll let him take over, but do you feel it was an accurate portrayal of that, how the mood there, the kind of ongoing tension that was pretty well portrayed? And well, I think maybe everybody else, I know I certainly want to know more about it and how that got started, and also being, I'd like to know what we can do about it, but I'm going to let you take it from here. Let us know.
Yeah, I thought the answer is yes. I think it's very accurate, it's very authentic, and I think it brings to the fore in a very authentic way, exactly how life in a mixed city like Jaffa look, and how people, the people from these both groups feel each other and think about each other, and I think it does a very good job of showing how um, um, geographically everything is so mixed. They live in a quite small city, very much mixed with each other, but how there's a deep segregation in many other kind of informal, some formal ways, like different schools sometimes, and a lot of informal ways. These two communities live side by side rather than with each other, and they're kind of segregated, even in mixed cities like Jaffa. Um, yeah, I think in that sense, and in other ways, it was a very good kind of ethnography on film of the place. Um, what I planned for us today is to speak, to start, to have a kind of a 20 minutes, 25, 30-minute lecture about the background. It will be mostly not about the film, but kind of the political background. So um, I'll say something in general about the Arab community in Israel. I'll make some distinctions that I think are important, and I'll try to point out some other basic features of this community. And then at the end, I'll talk a little bit about Jaffa itself, the city itself, and some of its history and features. And I think it'll give us a good kind of background, and then we can open it up and talk specifically about the film, um, or about anything else that you'd like. So let's see. I'll share my screen. Um, do you see it? You see my screen? Okay. So I want to start by making an important distinction, which sometimes people. So what I'm going to say now in the lecture, if you have some previous knowledge, this might be like kind of boring. But if you don't, it might be helpful to kind of set the basic things in place. So there's an important distinction that gets mixed between two groups of Arab Palestinians who live in the territory that is called Israel or Palestine. Now, if you look at the map, the yellow or the kind of light brown area over here, these are the borders of these are the internationally recognized borders of the state of Israel. It's sometimes called Israel proper. These were the lines of the armistice agreement that was signed in 1949 after the big 1948 war in which Israel was established. all the people who live within this territory, within the yellow territory, within Israel proper, are Israeli citizens. There are Arab Palestinians. Sometimes they're called Arab Israelis. Sometimes the film calls them Palestinian Israelis. I will call them Arab Israelis just so we make a distinction between Arab Israelis and Palestinians. And so Arab Israelis have Israeli citizenship, and they're at least formally, they are equal citizens. They vote. It's not only a formal thing. They vote for the parliament. They vote for the prime minister. They enjoy Israeli welfare privileges or universal health care and so on. They have freedom of movement, a passport, an ID, everything. Jaffa, the city, I circled it in red. It's near Tel Aviv. It's inside Israel proper. So the Arabs or the Palestinians that you saw in the film are all Israeli citizens, are all of that group. A different group that we usually talk about when we say Palestinians, when you hear about it in the news, these are Arab Palestinians who live here in the green areas, in the West Bank and in the Gaza Strip. The West Bank and Gaza Strip were territories that were occupied by Israel in a later war, in the war of 1967. And Israel holds them, and it occupies them, but it did not annex them formally. And the people who live there, the Palestinians who live there, are not Israeli citizens. They're not equal citizens to Israeli citizens. They don't vote. They're under Israeli rule, but they don't vote for the Israeli parliament or the Israeli prime minister. They don't have the welfare rights that Israeli citizens have. They don't have the kind of legal protections that citizens have, and they don't have the freedom of movement that citizens have. So their predicament is totally different from that of the Arab Israelis that we see in the film. So that's kind of an important distinction to locate us where we are. The film talks about Arab Israelis, the ones who are citizens of Israel. And I will also focus on them and what I say from now. And now I'm trying to, oh, okay, here it is. So just a minute before, how do I go back? Okay, before I move forward. So this distinction is very important, but in a way, it is we can think about it as a historical accident. Why? Because these constitute two different social groups, but nonetheless, they originate from the same people. They share a same ethnic identity. They're both Arab Palestinians, and they share a similar culture, ethnic identity, nationality to some extent, and also sometimes kinship. Okay, so people have family across the Green Line or across the border, and you saw it in the film where the family from Jaffa goes to visit their relatives in Gaza, right? And they have all kinds of problems going on. So how did this happen? It happened in the War of 48. So those Arabs who found themselves at the end of the War of 48 still within the territory that was now the new state of Israel became Arab Israelis. They, at first, until 1966, were under a military government, so kind of martial law or a military government. From 1966, the military government was canceled, and they became equal citizens. Those their brethren who found themselves outside of that territory, so in the West Bank or Gaza, became Jordanian subjects or Egyptian subjects. And then later on in 1967 became, when Israel occupied these territories, became Israeli subjects, but not Israeli citizens. Okay? And so this is kind of the history of how this distinction was formed. Now let's start focusing on the Arab Israelis. Now, by the way, if you want to stop me for questions or things are not understood or I'm talking too fast or whatever, please feel free to jump in. So within Israel proper, within the kind of the state of Israel, the citizens of Israel, this is how it's split. 7 million are Jews, about 75%, and 2 million are Arabs, about 21 or 20%. Arab population, this is their distribution on the map in Israel, where they are mostly concentrated. They're mostly concentrated. I will leave this area over here because it's kind of out of our story. I can talk about it later, but it's a different group here of Arab Palestinians that we can talk about later, but it's not the main focus. They are mainly concentrated here in the Galilee, so up in the north, and along what is called the triangle over here next to the West Bank. Okay, this is their main concentrations. They're also in other places down south. There's a Bedouin population. In Jerusalem, there's a big Arab Palestinian population. In Jaffa near Tel Aviv, in Haifa, and in other places. But these are where they are the majority, where they're really concentrated. Now, they live mainly in two types of settlements, the Arab Israelis or the Palestinian Israelis. One is all Arab villages or towns. These are the historic villages and really the historic villages of Palestine. They've been there for hundreds of years. They usually started as kind of rural settlements with agriculture, and nowadays they have grown to be towns, as you see in this photo of a town called Arbe in the Galilee. So it's a rural area, the Galilee. It started as a rural settlement, and as you see now, it's the size of a town. It's very dense, and it's a big population. So this is one form of settlement, and the other form of settlement are the mixed cities, like for example Jaffa and other cities, Haifa, Akko, Lod, Ramle, and so on and so forth. These are mixed cities, so cities where Jews and Arabs live together. As you see in the film, they are more integrated in the mixed cities, so there's more mixing. Sometimes neighborhoods will be mixed. Sometimes even apartment buildings will have an Arab family and a Jewish family door to door. But as you've seen, they're also quite segregated at the same time. So they would usually go into different schools. Usually the networks of friendships and so on would be different. A lot of times they do share space in the sense of economy or business and stuff like that. So they have business relations, but socially there is there's a geographical mixing, but socially and politically and identity-wise, and in the informal sense, there's a lot of segregation between these two communities in the mixed cities. And now I want to say, I want to point out three kind of features or characteristics of this community, of the Arab citizens of Israel, the Arab Israelis or the Palestinian Israelis. One is that this is a community that went in its history that went from being the majority to being a minority. So before 1948, the Arabs of Palestine were the majority in Palestine. They had in 48 something like 70%. And as part of the War of 48, 700,000 Palestinians were either expelled or ran away, but anyhow, they're not able to come back. And there was, immediately after the war, a large Jewish immigration of Holocaust survivors and Jews from the Arab states that were kicked out of the Arab states came into Israel. And there was a demographic flip. And now, in the area of the state of Israel, the newly established state of Israel, the Arabs who stayed within the territory found themselves as a minority within a majority Jewish nation state that were, their enemy in war just 5 minutes ago. And so now they are the minority within the state that they once were the majority in. So this is one important feature to kind of understand also what's in their background or the back of their minds. A second very important feature is that they are equal citizens, and it's not only formal, it has very important implications. As I said, they can vote, it has economic implications, they have opportunity, they have freedom of movement, they have healthcare and so on. It's very important, but nonetheless, they suffer several layers or forms of discrimination that are informal or semi-formal. For example, land distribution. So the Arab settlements usually they have a problem of getting land and getting permits for construction. Now, remember, it's a very small country and a very dense country, and land is very important. The access to land is crucial, and it's very expensive as well. So land distribution. Another thing is government investment. So if you look at the investment in Arab settlements in education, healthcare, infrastructure, transportation, and so on per capita, it's lower than in the Jewish, historically lower than in the Jewish settlements. So there's discrimination in that sense. There's also different ways of informal discrimination, probably. Trying to get a job might be harder. Moving into certain neighborhoods would be a problem. Again, informally, but nonetheless a problem. And another thing is socioeconomic gap. So by and large and on average, the Arab population in Israel is poorer than the Jewish population, if you look at the numbers. Now, this might be changing, or we might be seeing a start of a change to this, pretty dramatic. In the last, I think it was 7 years ago or 6 years ago, for the first time, Israeli government approved two quite huge 5-year plans of investment to close these gaps in government investment, in infrastructure, in education, and so forth, with a value of 40 billion shekels in 10 years. It's a huge program. I know about it from up close because a friend of mine is one of the people who manages the program. It has a lot of challenges and so on, but they're doing serious work. It's not close to closing the gap, but it's a start. And so that also, to put that up there, that the governments, and actually it was right-wing governments in Israel that initiated this process. So that's the second feature: discrimination and inequality. A third feature is an internal tension that they have in their identity and in their daily praxis and in their politics between quote unquote Israelization or processes of Israelization and Palestinization. Or that is a tension between their identity as being Israeli citizens, as being a part of this, the Israeli state and Israeli society as equal citizens, or aspiring to be equal citizens, and their ethnic, political, cultural, and sometimes kinship relation and identification as Palestinians and solidarity with the Palestinians. So there, and really the two vectors of integration and segregation, or drawing closer and drawing farther apart, are happening happening at the same time. So, for example, in the last, say, I think 10 or 15 years, there has been a quite dramatic emergence and growth of an Arab middle class in Israel, quite successful, with college degrees, with well-paying jobs. And one of the places where you see, it's kind of an anecdote, but it's not only an anecdote, one of the places that you see it is in the medical professions. So 2 years ago, there was a research that showed that 50% of new doctors in Israel are Arabs, 50%, and their percentage in the population is 20%. And they're also very present in pharmaceutical industries and pharmacies, and among nurses and so on as well. So, for example, if you go to a hospital in the Galilee up north, where I grew up, you're going to meet like 90% of the staff that's going to take care of you is going to be Arab, both the doctors and the nurses and the pharmacists and everybody. And so this is quite dramatic. Another kind of feature of, or expression of, integration is in 2021, for the first time in the history of Israel, an Arab party, a new Arab party called Ram, had joined the coalition government with a Jewish Zionist government. Again, it's something that the Arab parties are usually do not join coalition because they don't want to recognize or cooperate formally with a Zionist government. And this was the first time that an Arab party said, we're putting aside this Israeli-Palestinian thing, and we simply want to advance our well-being and civil equality and so on, and join the government. And they had a lot of supporters. They were really kind of popular in the Arab street. So these are two expressions or reflections of this excess or this vector of growing integration. On the other hand, there is also the other vector of a growing identification with the Palestinians. Some of it is growing, some of it is stable. So for example, they don't serve in the army and they're not asked to serve in the army, so they don't need to fight their own people. Another thing that you see is, for example, in Independence Day, which is a day of celebration in Israel, the Palestinians mark it as the day of the Nakba, that is the catastrophe, because it's exactly the day when they lost their country. And so the Arab Israelis many times, well, they don't celebrate Independence Day, but many times they do commemorate and even do protests on Independence Day, commemorating the day of the Nakba, right? So you understand, you have citizens in the state that on our 4th of July, they mark it as a day of sorrow and grieving and so on. And so you get there the kind of tension in which they are caught. And this is a photo of Arab Israeli students on the Israeli Day of Independence that mark the Nakba Day, and they do a kind of a protest with Palestinian flags in front of Tel Aviv University. And if you see here in the background, there's always kind of a counter protest of kind of ultra-Zionists who are protesting against the fact that these are citizens of the state and they are kind of commemorating the Day of Independence of the state as a day of catastrophe and sorrow. And so this is, for example, places where the two communities clash. And there are others, but I think that's enough for now. Now I want to move to, in the time that I've left, to talk about Jaffa in specific. Now let's look at so this is the location of Jaffa on the map. It's right in the center, in close to Tel Aviv. And this is more closely. So Tel Aviv is the big modern metropolitan of Israel. It's really not Tel Aviv, but it's a much bigger metropolis of all the satellite towns and so on. This is really the cultural and economic and political center of the country. And Jaffa is located right there. So right in the middle, on the south of Tel Aviv, it's really connected to Tel Aviv. So it's one continuous urban space, and they're also connected they became the same municipality. So the city is called Tel Aviv Jaffa today. Historically, Jaffa was an important Arab-Palestinian city. So it was very important for the Arab community in Palestine. It was an important urban center. It had 70,000 Arabs and 5,000 Jews before 48. So around 48, but before 48. In 48, it was occupied, as part of the War of 48, it was occupied by Jewish fighting forces. Large parts of it were destroyed. Were destroyed in the war. This is a photo of the neighborhood of Al-Manshia, which is was on the border between Jaffa and Tel Aviv. And most of it was destroyed. It doesn't exist today. It turned into it was kind of bulldozed. The ruins were bulldozed, and it became a park. It is a park now between Jaffa and Tel Aviv, with only a mosque that is still standing there. So big parts of the city were destroyed, and most of the Arab inhabitants ran away or were expelled from it. The Arab population turned from 70,000 to 4,000 at the end of the war. So a dramatic change. Another thing that happened exactly at the same time, so after the War of 48, Israel absorbs a huge population of immigrants, Holocaust survivors, whatever survived of European Jewry in the Holocaust, and also the Jews who were expelled from Arab states. And the Jewish yeshuv at that point, it had 600,000 people, and it absorbs 1.2 or 1.3 million immigrants. So think of a state that absorbs twice as much people as it has originally. And so there's a huge housing crisis in Israel. And one of the solutions is to put immigrants, the new immigrants, into the houses, into the deserted or abandoned Arab houses. And so much of Jaffa, the old Arab houses, become populated by new Jewish immigrants, either Holocaust survivors or Jews from different places, some from Arab states. There was a big a community of Bulgarian Jews in Jaffa. And they, at least at the beginning, they live within a lot of them live in the old Arab houses. In the 1950s, it's joined in the same municipality with Tel Aviv. And from the 1950s to the 2000s, and to some extent to this day, it's a fairly poor city, a poor town. It has working class, mostly working class Arab people and working class Jews. It was, through the years, kind of considered the backyard of Tel Aviv. Infrastructure is not great. The education is not great. Crime rates are usually higher than in other places, and it was a kind of a backyard. In the 21st century, so 2000s and up, there are some dramatic changes. So first of all, today there are around 20,000 Arabs living in Jaffa and about 40,000 Jews. And I'll name three important processes that are happening in Jaffa really in the last, say, 20 years. One is gentrification. So Jaffa is a poor town, or poor city, but it is located right in the center of Israel. And real estate prices have been skyrocketing in Israel for about 30 years. And economically, Israel is very strong, is developing very rapidly. And so Jaffa becomes a site both because it's very central, so the location is great, and also because it has its own kind of charm. And if you look at, so it's very beautiful. It has the old city is beautiful. It's on the Mediterranean Sea, and it's old, and it has some very impressive and beautiful Arab architecture. So both because of its charm and because of its location, it becomes very desirable for real estate investors and all kinds of forms of gentrification. So there's a lot of renovations, a lot of investment, and a lot of new populations that are coming in, mostly middle class and upper class, most of them Jews, but not only. So sometimes these are part of the new Arab middle class or Arab upper class that are coming, but mostly Jews. And what happens, the reality on the ground, especially, for example, in Ajami, which is the neighborhood where the kid who has Laurel, what was his name? Allah, the kid who has the boat, and his father's a fisherman. So Ajami, especially in Ajami, it's because of these processes of gentrification, it's a very kind of fascinating patchwork. The urban landscape itself is a fascinating patchwork of very rich, very high end, and very, very poor. So you get beautifully renovated Arab houses, and then next to it really, really slums. And so and everything in the middle. So you get, for example, so this is like a regular street in Ajami, not a slum, but it's humble. And then you have stuff more like this, or like his house. You remember his house is really like it really looks like a slum. But then next to it, you'll have these kind of renovated houses, very beautiful, very kind of with a lot of investment and so on. And so part of this are people who are moving into these houses within the neighborhood, and also some of them into gated communities. This is the most famous one. The project is called Andromeda, and it's a gated community, so it's closed. It's very expensive, so very rich people live here. But if you go really next door, it can be a slum. So everything in Ajami and Jaffa is right next to each other. There's no in that sense, everything is in your face. All the tensions and the gaps are in your face. So this on the one hand brings economic development and tourism and so on, and economic opportunities. On the other hand, it also brings a lot of tension. because the poor populations are slowly kind of getting kicked out of Jaffa simply because of the rise of prices and other things, other tensions that happen in gentrification. And so you see here, Jaffa is a place where a kind of a class divide or class tension is intertwined with national ethnic tension between Jews and Arabs. So really the two are kind of colliding or intertwining. So that's one. Gentrification is one process. Another process that's changing life in Jaffa and in other mixed cities is the penetration of a radical right wing. And so in the last, say, 20 or 30 years, the fringe right wing, it's not so fringe anymore, unfortunately, but the radical right wing in Israel has taken a new interest in the mixed cities. Usually the right wing, their main project was in the West Bank and Gaza, settling the West Bank and Gaza and making sure that Israel would never let these territories go. But in the last 20 or 30 years, they have identified the mixed cities as problematic and as a danger from within because they're within Israel proper. And so what they do is, first of all, they do all kinds of protest and things, and you see that in the film. I think I have that here.
Mm-hmm.
So they stage marches and protest and so on within the mixed cities, calling for the Jewidizing of Jaffa and so on. This guy, he's also in the film. This guy Tamar Ben Gvir, when this was filmed, he was still a fringe, kind of radical, crazy right-wing activist, arrested many times and so on and so forth. Today, unfortunately, he is the Minister of Police of all things in Israel, in what is really probably the most right-wing government that we've ever
Yes.
had. And so what they're doing is protest. And the second thing that they're doing is what is called the Torah nucleus. These are groups of religious right-wingers who move as a group to live within the mixed cities. And they do all kinds of projects and so on. And their main goal is to kind of strengthen the Jewish identity of the mixed cities and kind of to push back against what they see as the threat of from the Arab population. And they're creating, and this activity is creating a lot of tension, or is awakening a lot of tension between Arabs and Jews in the mixed cities. That wasn't great 40 years ago, but it was pretty calm. It wasn't an open, it was less tense. And so this is the second thing that happened, the penetration of the right wing. And the third thing, kind of consequently, is a growing inter-ethnic tension. So again, it was there. It wasn't like, say, 40 years ago, it wasn't, or until the 90s, it wasn't, a heaven and earth of coexistence and cooperation and integration, but it was quite calm. I mean, these places were not as tense. But there's a process since the 1990s. The Israeli right wing is part of it, but is not the only contributor. The part of the Arab population in the mixed cities itself also are contributing to that, of a growing inter-ethnic tension within the mixed cities. And we saw from the 1990s in different points where things flare up in the conflict, that you also see riots and violence and attacks on Jews in mixed cities in Jaffa. So Jaffa had one in 1994. It had a significant one in 2000, 2008, and lately in 2021, riots, lynching, and so on. That was then Jews retaliated and also attacked innocent Arabs. So you see another process that's happening is kind of a rise in tension in the mixed cities. I think I'll stop here. There's one more thing, but it's not super relevant to us. So I think I'll stop here and I'll open it up to questions or comments, or we can talk about the film or whatever.
I'm sure there's plenty of questions. Omri and I were speaking before you all came on, and having been a public school teacher, I did notice, I totally understood the children because children in Lawrence, Kansas at that age don't want to touch each other. And I think anybody who's been around them know that. boys don't want to do the square dancing, and and we were saying that that's I think across the world. Children are shy, and the thought of touching a boy or touching a girl and dancing, the whole thing, that's kind of something that had nothing to do with the tensions in the country, but just
Yeah.
the way children are at that point. And when I wrote to him, I said that I understand, but the culture is just kind of a puzzlement to me. But boy, I I took notes. Uh,
Yeah,
there's
so
there,
I threw a lot at you. I'm
there's
sorry.
so much to discuss here. I but to kind of touch it to the film, when the one a sad part for me was when the right wingers came into the town and they were marching and they were protected, and the police seemed very tense, and they were telling people to get out of their way and all that. And our little Noor, our little Arab girl that has such a turnaround from the dancing, she cried, and she was afraid. And yeah, that would be something. I don't think any of us here in Lawrence, Kansas have ever experienced anything like that, to live in that kind of a tension. And I just wondered if that's just something I wanted to point out. So the culture is far different. The boys and girls don't want to touch. I don't care where they are. But
Yeah.
but bringing that into it really really is difficult. And the fact that this Pierre fellow, and I guess he had to leave. So his parents were, well, his father was Irish, but his mother was an Arab. Right. So they left and left their house behind. And then the scene I remember when he and his dancing partner, Miss Yvonne, just want to go up on top of the house. And apparently the director or somebody says, "We need to go now."
Yeah.
I mean, that kind of tension that he couldn't even come in the house is something that's very foreign to us here.
Yeah.
But anyway, that was not really a question, but just something I want to point out. Boys and girls don't want to touch. I don't care where they are. And then once they start touching, they don't want to stop touching, but that doesn't come till high school. Okay. So, does anybody have a question that they'd like to give our very wonderful professor who's given us an amazing description of what's going on there? Anybody?
Jay has a question in the chat.
Mhm.
Okay. Uh, this one is from Kay. Was the film realistic? Was it a helpful strategy to have the dancing be a way to understand other cultures? I
Mm.
guess it's just your opinion.
Yeah, it's a very good question. Yeah, I told Lorel also before that the film was very realistic, um, in the sense of how it depicts the place and time and the people. The project itself, I think it I think it's worth it in the sense that, even if it doesn't solve the conflict, it's still valuable and meaningful, even for the experience that these kids got. Even just the experience that they got of dealing with their shame and being able to dance and having fun and winning a competition and so on. So it's valuable in that sense. And also in the sense, yeah, that they got to be in touch with people, with kids from the other group, and to see that they're humans and so on. And I think it's important, it's valuable.
Hmm.
I think what is always the limits of these kind of projects, and saying that they have a limit doesn't mean that I think that they're not valuable. I think they're very valuable and they should be done. And I think and simply before everything, before analysis, it's simply a beautiful project. I mean, before you say anything politically, it's just beautiful, and what he does with the kids and what happens to the kids, it's beautiful. You can't miss it, I think, when you watch the film.
Hmm.
But I think the limits of these projects of promoting understanding and so on are always that at the end the solution is political. And as long as the political problems are not solved, and these two peoples are not able to agree on how to divide this land up, or establish two states, or live together somehow in one state where they'll be equal citizens, or find some kind of agreed solution, and the conflict kind of continues to flare up, it's like a huge wave that kind of takes it's you can't it's overwhelming when
Yes.
everything is burning around. You cannot, and I feel, I know it from personal experience. It doesn't matter how much you are, how much it's when things flare up. If you stand and talk for coexistence and so on, you're like a madman. And it's really the politics there is really like it's like a wave, and I think part of the conclusion is that the solution has to be political. It cannot be only at the level of seeing that, because even if you see that the other side is humane and you can relate to it and so on, still the political problem persists, and I think that's the limit of these kinds of projects.
Mm-hmm. It's almost like I was just thinking, and somebody step in and comment or tell me to eat my whatever whoopie pie, but it makes me think of civil rights here in this country. Black Lives Matter, Arab Lives Matter.
Mm,
That we have to get past. We have to own up to the culpability. Yes, terrible things have been done. I know, and recently the things done are unspeakable. And but yet, how does it stop? I understand. I think it was lovely that the children danced, and maybe they can look back and say, "Well, I danced with a Jew once, or I danced with an Arab girl, and I didn't drop dead or anything." But to get the people to come together, I don't know. Does anybody have any thoughts about any parallel here in our country, or just anything at all about how this could how this can be solved? I know it's only been going on, oh, what, 10,000 years ish. I mean, it's a lot, but or for Native American cultures here in this country that had their land taken, that are now stepping forward and saying, we're still here. If you've read any of the literature from 1880 and 1890, they were regarded as a dying breed, a vanishing race. They took photographs of these vanishing people. They're still here, and they have things to say and things to share with us. So I don't know. Anybody got any thoughts? You know, I'm sorry, I grew up in the 60s. Shelley!
I had two thoughts. I was very surprised that I guess I have seen, maybe it's a stereotype, or maybe they're just more orthodox, if that's the correct term, of the women who aren't allowed to, the Muslim women who aren't allowed to have any contact with any males outside their family, kind of thing. And so the idea of Arab mothers allowing their daughters and sons to touch the other gender, not just Jews, that surprised me that they got them to do that.
Mhm.
I thought, well, that's going to be, losing proposition. Um, and and I was a little bit surprised by his insistence that it had to be girls dancing with boys, and never girls with girls or boys with boys, because
mm.
maybe at least you start someplace. But
Mhm.
I don't know how anybody else thought about that.
Mhm. Well, I could certainly see his training as a ballroom dancer. I mean, he knew ballroom dancing. It's like there's got to be nine guys on the baseball team, you know. We always have a catcher. I mean, it's how it's set up, but yet I don't, he brought his stuff to it. Um, but I and that really pushed them all to go past that. I think the girls would have danced with the girls. I think in the first school, wasn't it just girls that showed up? How like girls. They like to dance. Um, but that, he had to have boys to dance with him. Yeah, I don't know. It's a lot. I did notice too, though, when they did dance together, that last scene in the gymnasium, all those people sitting there happy, laughing, smiling, applauding. I see that in my grandchildren's school every time I go. It's just people enjoying their children and what the children are trying to do. And that warmed my heart very much. And I don't know that they really could tell who was who there, but maybe they could. I don't know. I want to give somebody else a chance to say something if they have anything to say or any questions. We're pretty close on our time, but anybody have any questions about anything?
Ellen had a question in the chat.
Okay. Yes, here's one. I'm sorry, I never look at the chat. I always look at you. I'm used to teaching. Would be interesting to interview the young folks now and see if there's been any long-lasting effects. You would not have been much older than these children when the film was made. And I guess they're asking you, Omri, was your life similar? I
Mm.
don't, yeah.
Um, no, I think it was very different. First of all, it was in a different time. So
Hmm.
I was born in 1981. So I was a kid in the 80s and then an adolescent in the 90s. The atmosphere was very different at that time. The 90s was through the whole 90s, there was the Oslo peace process was underway,
Yes.
and things were totally different. There was a sense, at least where I grew up, that there's a horizon to this, and that this thing actually might be sorted out soon. And it was also the end of the Cold War, and these, the happy Clinton 90s, where it seemed like so these international conflicts, long-lasting conflicts in Ireland and so on, are South Africa are coming to an end, and there was a sense that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict would also. So I actually grew up in a fairly optimistic environment, and also very different in the sense that I grew up in a kibbutz. So
Hmm.
both, I didn't experience urban life the way they live in a very urban space. I didn't experience a life that is so mixed with Arabs. We had an Arab Palestinian village 5 minutes from us, and from time to time we would have like sports days and stuff like that with them. But it was very unorganic, so there was no organic ties between. Again, there were people from there who worked in my kibbutz. You would from time to time you would know a person, and there were personal connections, but as communities, the two communities really did not mix, and so I I didn't live so close with Arabs as they do. Again, I think they're also living very far from Arabs in many sense, but
Hmm.
at least geographically, they're very kind of intertwined, and they live in the same streets and the same houses, same
Hmm.
apartments, and so on. So in those two senses, it was quite different.
Different.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I remember seeing a documentary from probably a good 20 years ago, where I think it was like a music camp where they got um, Arab, Israeli, Palestinian kids and Jewish kids playing like an orchestra or something together.
Hmm.
And it was like summer camp kind of thing, music camp. And it apparently went quite well for a number of years. And then I'm thinking there was some sort of war or some sort of, maybe it was the Intifada or something broke it down and it fizzled out. But um, I guess I'd wondered how much the dance lessons are, if they're still continuing since the last year or so, or if everything had
Hmm.
frozen up.
I would. I told Laurel earlier that I one of the saddest thing for I don't want to depress everyone, but one of the saddest thing for me in the film was to understand that or to realize that this kind of thing today after October 7th is I can't imagine it. I can't imagine the parents on both sides being on board with um, something really so innocent as like dancing with
Mhm.
kids dancing together. It's unimaginable, and I would guess that it stopped. Maybe at some point these things will return and things will change. I hope and I believe that they
Let's
will and
hope
they
so.
can. But I think things are now so there's so much hurt going around on both sides um, that that it's unimaginable something like that today.
Uh-oh, they're clearing out the library, and I'm looking down at my corner, and okay, and I've got my I'm in Kathleen's office. Sorry, it's 8 o'clock. Before we go, though, all clear, they're telling us. Well, I guess we have to clear out too. That means me. I don't want to be locked in here all night. Goodness knows who's crawling around. How would you rate the film, everybody? We've got to give it a rating before we go. 5 is like, I love it. 1 is like, meh. You could give me the hand sign. How did you feel about it? Yeah, I thought it was really great too. All right. Well, gosh, Omri, thank you so much. I wish we could have a cup of tea sometime. A dear friend
Absolutely.
of mine, Mickey Waxman, an American Jew, went and lived in a kibbutz for at least three or
Oh
four
yeah.
years in the 60s. So we could talk about kibbutz life. He brought me back a wonderful shirt. It was great. So anyway, thank you all for being here. And we want to thank Omri very much for what a detailed story of Israel and who's where and what's what because it's hard to put together. And I thank you all for being here. And we're going to sign off now because we're recording. But thank you again for being here. Thank you for dessert
Thank
and
you.
movie. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you
Thanks.
for having me. Bye bye.
Oh, you're so wonderful. Thank you.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye.